We just want to know what happened and why our baby didn't come home.
Nolan's last words to his mother hung in the air of that kitchen long after he walked out the door. Neither of them knew it would be the final time. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel exists to tell stories like this one the right way. Verified, careful, respectful of the people living through it. Hit subscribe now, because what you're about to see only gets more complicated from here.
The family of 18-year-old Nolan Wells is demanding answers after he was found dead days after disappearing during a 4th of July boating trip with friends to a remote Mississippi island. Now his parents are calling for a full and transparent investigation into what happened. Our Madison Scarpino is live with the very latest on this mystery. Hi, Madison.
Hi, Aisha. Well, the parents of Nolan are saying things that they're hearing about their son's disappearance and death are not adding up. Prominent civil rights attorney Ben Crump is now representing the family. He is leading an independent investigation as he says the family has distrust in Mississippi law enforcement officials. Here they are at a press conference in New York yesterday. Crump says the family is not going to accept that Nolan accidentally drowned, as law enforcement has allegedly alluded to. They say their son was an athlete and a good swimmer.
Nolan Wells was not a stranger to hard work before he was a headline. At Ocean Springs High School, he played more than one sport. At Southwest Mississippi Community College, he lined up as a wide receiver, majoring in general business, already looking ahead to the season he was set to return for. Coaches didn't describe him as loud. They described him as steady, the kind of player who led by showing up, not by talking. On the evening of July 3rd, he cooked baked salmon for his parents after his mother had come home from a long day at work. It's a small detail. It's also the last ordinary thing we know he did. He left that night for a friend's house, where he'd stay before the holiday trip. Before he walked out, he turned to his mother and said, "Hey, Mom, I'm about to go. I love you." A hug, a kiss, and then he was gone. His father, Elmore, had a rule he'd repeated to Nolan for years. If you go with a group, you stay with the group. It's the kind of advice a parent gives 100 times, never expecting to need it. We'll come back to that rule, because within 24 hours, it would matter more than anyone could have imagined. That's the boy who left for Horn Island on the morning of July 4th. Not a mystery yet. Just a son, a teammate, a friend, heading out to celebrate a holiday with people he trusted.
Here's Nolan's heartbroken mother.
We just want to know. We just want to know what happened and why our baby didn't come home.
This all comes after Nolan took a boat to Horn Island on the 4th of July with a group of friends and never returned. His disappearance prompting a big search before his body was found on Monday. And the Wells family saying there are a bunch of questions still about what happened. For example, the family says Nolan's friends had his phone after his mother tracked it down. They also had his keys. And his mother says it appears texts and Snapchats on the phone had been deleted. They say the friends said Nolan insisted on staying behind while they returned home on the boat, but Crump says that's not like him.
The boys say no. He said he was going to stay with her, and that's a conflict. And the troubling thing is if they're saying, well, he made the decision to stay behind, would an 18-year-old college student say, go ahead without me, I don't want my cell phone or anything? It just doesn't add up. And so that, around that 3 o'clock time, seems to be the last time that we have those statements. However, as Christine said, they're suggesting that they didn't leave to 4:30 though. So, you know, if you said you were leaving at 3, why did you left at 4:30? And where was Nolan for that hour? And talking about, I think she was asking about the cell phone. What was your last scene? Oh, I answered last scene. I thought you said something else. Oh, the missing. Okay.
So his friend contacted me. It was around 11:07, and then I called my friend to ask her had she seen him, because that would be the only other place I would think he would go if he were back on land. And so then when she told me no, she's like, don't worry, I'm going to look for him. And that's when we got on the phone. First I called, it was either the county or Ocean Springs. It was either one of them, but whichever I called first, I was directed to call DMR. Because so DMR, if I'm not mistaken, they handle cases with the island or the water in that area. So the young lady took the information down. She's like, I'm going to give you a call back. I said, okay. So when she called me back, she explained to me, she was like, I've spoken with the Coast Guard, which his friend had contacted the Coast Guard, Warren had contacted the Coast Guard to report Nolan missing as well. So I'm on the phone with the DMR, he's calling Coast Guard. And she said, I spoke with Coast Guard, and you're gonna have to complete the report with, I think it was Ocean Springs. So we go down to the Ocean Springs Police Department. We're told because it's a jurisdiction issue that they can't file the missing police report. Jackson County the Sheriff's Department ends up calling me back, I think if I remember this correctly, and she was calling to check to see were they able to do it. I told her no, they couldn't do it. The young lady on the phone and the officer at Ocean Springs Police Department spoke. He explained to her why Ocean Springs Police Department could not complete the missing persons report. She said, okay. He gives the phone back. She's like, look, I'm just going to go ahead and do it so there's no more back and forth. So my husband and I, we met an officer in the McDonald's parking lot. I think at this point it's maybe around 12. Don't quote me on that. But we explained to him, what he looked like, age, all those things. Last time he was reported seen, which again, by his friend, he said that the last time he physically saw him was at 3 p.m. and they were getting ready to leave the island.
Horn Island isn't the kind of place you stumble onto. It's a barrier island in the Gulf, 8 to 12 miles off the Mississippi coast, undeveloped, unreachable except by private boat. No cell towers waiting to catch a signal, no neighbors to notice if something goes wrong, just sand, water, and whoever chooses to make the crossing that day. Nolan made that crossing with a group of friends on the morning of the 4th. Here is what nobody disputes. At approximately 3 p.m., Nolan was seen on the island's north end, talking with a young woman. That's the last moment where every account, his friends, hers, the investigators, lines up cleanly. After that afternoon, the story starts to fracture, but we'll hold that fracture for later. What we know for certain is this: when the boat carrying Nolan's friends returned to the mainland, it carried their gear, their coolers, their memories of the day, and Nolan's cell phone, not Nolan. Nobody raised an alarm right away. It wasn't until close to 11 p.m. that one of Nolan's friends reached out to his mother, Christine, to say he hadn't come back. In the early hours of July 5th, Christine posted to Facebook, unsure if her son had even made it back to shore at all. Then she did what any parent would do. She started looking for him herself. She opened Life 360. The app showed her exactly where Nolan's phone was, not drifting somewhere in the Gulf, not lost on a remote island, but sitting still, on land, at a friend's house in Ocean Springs. Her son was unaccounted for on an island accessible only by boat. His phone was resting safely inside a house he'd never returned to. Christine reached that location before police did. Sit with that for a second. A mother, staring at a blinking dot on a screen, watching her son's entire digital life sit motionless in a place he wasn't, while the actual person attached to that phone was somewhere she couldn't see, couldn't reach, and couldn't yet explain. That single image, a phone at rest while its owner is missing, is the axis this entire case turns on. And it's about to send an entire coastline into motion. If a case like this deserves careful, fact-first coverage instead of noise and speculation, that's exactly what we're building here. Subscribe now, because the search that follows is only the beginning of what this family would have to fight for.
This is right off the coast of Mississippi. It's back on the July 4th weekend. We know that his body was tragically found that Monday on the island, washed ashore. His family is demanding transparency. They're demanding a full investigation. In fact, Christine and Elmore Wansley told Good Morning America, GMA, in an interview today, we just want honesty and transparency. We want a thorough investigation. We want that same respect that would be given to anybody else. And that's it. We just want answers. And they have even retained prominent civil rights attorney Ben Crump. We did a sidebar yesterday explaining why they would want to hire a lawyer at this time. It's about ensuring that they get the information they're seeking, potentially assessing a legal issue for a lawsuit, pressuring authorities to be transparent about the investigation, ordering an independent autopsy. In fact, Ben Crump told ABC News Live this week that Nolan's body would be flown to Washington, D.C. for an independent autopsy. This came after the Mississippi State Medical Examiner already apparently performed an autopsy, but that agency indicated that the results could take weeks because of toxicology tests. Those findings are pending. Now, there is something to keep in mind here. Authorities reportedly believe this was a tragic accident, that this was a case of drowning. According to the New York Post, John Ledbetter, the Jackson County sheriff, said there's no information that we have right now that would lead us to believe that a crime has occurred. According to CNN, Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lynn indicated there were no immediate signs of physical injury. But this is a story that has gotten a lot of attention. It has sparked many thoughts, many theories, particularly given what we're learning. For instance, according to CNN, Nolan didn't return to the dock with his friends that day. His family didn't understand why he would separate from them. That he was.
By July 5th, what began as one mother's panic had become a multi-agency operation. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the U.S. Coast Guard, park rangers from Gulf Island's National Seashore, and a volunteer organization called the United Cajun Navy search and rescue civilians who mobilize when official channels move too slowly for a family that can't afford to wait. A command post went up at the Mars Lake boat launch in Ocean Springs. That first day, a Cajun Navy rescue specialist and a drone operator combed the island by boat for hours. Nothing. At first light on July 6th, United Cajun Navy Vice President Brian Trasher took to the air in a single-engine fixed-wing aircraft, tracing a grid over Horn Island, over Ship Island, down toward the Chandelier Islands in Louisiana, searching from above for anything, a shape on the sand, a color that didn't belong, a sign that 3 days of silence was about to end. At 8:45 that morning, it did. A park ranger, walking the northwestern tip of Horn Island, found a body in the water.
18-year-old Nolan Wells vanished on Horn Island off the Mississippi coast on Saturday afternoon. And this morning, a body was found during the search, raising devastating fears for his family and everyone who has been praying.
Trasher, still airborne, watched it happen from 300 feet up. He saw boats beaching that hadn't been there minutes before. He saw law enforcement vessels converging, one, then another, then nearly a dozen, clustering around a single stretch of shoreline like the island itself was calling them in. By that afternoon, the United Cajun Navy announced the search was over. But for Christine Wells Wansley, an entirely different search was just beginning. Finding her son's body didn't answer a single one of her questions. It only made them impossible to postpone any longer.
And being that there is lack of confidence in the local authorities, who have already, in my judgment, seemed to have mishandled where it was going. Because to just immediately, before a week time, saying there was nothing done wrong, when we hear that this young man was engaged in some kind of argument that was on tape, that his cell phone and keys ended up with one of the people that were there on the island and got away.
Now we go to Ben Crump, and he claims the stories about what happened to Nolan just doesn't match.
The glaring contradictions just jump out at you. The fact that he is there with his friends, and you look at all the videos, it seems to be he's the only black on the island, or maybe one other, but not many. And so, Jared, you have where a young woman he was talking to says that, well, Nolan said he was going back to get on the boat with the boys. The boys say that Nolan told them he was going to stay and talk to the young woman. It's a contradiction.
Identification came fast. Confirmation of what it meant did not. On July 7th, Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind confirmed through dental records that the body recovered from Horn Island was Nolan Wells. Reports would later note DNA testing corroborated it. Lind told reporters there were no immediate, obvious signs of foul play or trauma on the body, but he ordered a full autopsy anyway. Specifically, he said, so the state medical examiner could determine whether foul play or trauma had occurred. Read that back. The absence of visible injury didn't close the door. It was the reason the door stayed open. That autopsy took place the same day at the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office Coast Lab. Officials said toxicology results, the piece that would show whether alcohol or other substances played any role, could take 2 to 3 weeks to come back. Sheriff John Ledbetter offered an early read. No indication, so far, of drug or alcohol use. Not a conclusion. A snapshot, taken before the full picture existed. And then came the phrase that would ignite an entire online reckoning. No foul play suspected. 4 words, repeated across headlines, stripped of the nuance behind them. What officials meant, when pressed, was narrower. No immediate, obvious signs. Not a ruling, not a verdict. A distinction that mattered enormously to a grieving family and got lost almost instantly in translation. Weeks would pass. The lab work would continue, and into that silence, the space where medicine hadn't yet spoken, 2 very different human stories were about to collide.
Photos and videos that were taken on July 4th. Sheriff Ledbetter telling outlet WXXV, right now, I know time is of the essence, but folks want answers 10 minutes ago, and unfortunately, that takes time to get the accurate information. It's going to take a lot of hard work. I think the family deserves the truth, and that's what we're here to provide for them and for the public. The sheriff adding, according to WAPT, I would urge anyone that has information or that was on the island to take down as much information as they can to piece together what happened. I say all that to tell you what happened today. There's a grieving family. They have a lot of questions. They want answers. What happened today? Major press conference was held in Harlem. You had the family, their attorney Ben Crump, and Reverend Al Sharpton, all demanding the same things: transparency, answers, and the truth about what happened to Nolan Wells. So if you've been following this, you know there's been a lot of anticipation to this. We were expecting the family to potentially announce the results of that independent autopsy that was conducted. And again, this is separate from the state's medical examination. So it seems by all accounts, Nolan's body was flown to Washington, D.C. Now, we didn't get the results of that independent autopsy because there was reporting that we may get those today, but we did get something. Maybe not what everyone expected, but Reverend Al Sharpton kicked things off, and he was getting straight to the point.
What we've been told does not make sense.
Everything up to this point has been about what happened to Nolan. This is about what people say happened. Here is the contradiction, laid out exactly as it exists. No more, no less. A young woman told investigators that Nolan said he was heading back to the boat, back to the boys. Nolan's friends told a different version, that Nolan said he wanted to stay behind, to keep talking with her. 2 accounts. 1 conversation. They cannot both be true. Attorney Ben Crump, retained by the family, put it plainly. It's a contradiction, not an accusation, a fact about the evidence itself. 2 testimonies that describe the same 5 minutes on a beach and arrive at opposite conclusions. Then there's the footage. A video began circulating online, allegedly showing a heated confrontation on Horn Island on July 4th, near the same stretch of shoreline where Nolan's body would later be found. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office confirmed it's aware of the video. It has not verified its authenticity. It has not connected it to Nolan's death. Not yet. Separately, Crump has referenced another piece of footage, one where a voice, identified by others present that day, can be heard asking for a phone. Whether that clip and the confrontation video are one and the same, or 2 entirely different pieces of evidence, remains unclear. That ambiguity itself is part of the story. What is clear, Nolan's friend group has since retained their own legal counsel. Crump's team has said they intend to interview them directly. As of the most recent update, that conversation hadn't yet happened. Two testimonies that don't match. A video no one has verified. A group of young men now speaking only through their lawyers. That's not speculation. That's the documented state of the investigation. And it's exactly why this case refuses to close quietly.
According to this witness statement, Lucas Aviz said that he last spoke to Nolan between 2 and 2:30, where he said he had to leave, and he saw him getting into a white boat with a center counsel before he departed. But authorities said that Nolan was last seen on the western tip of the island around 3 p.m. The video circulating was said to have been taken between 4 and 4:30, and shortly after that, a fight broke out between two white males at about 5 p.m., and that person left around 5:50 p.m. Everything is still unfolding. Here is a picture of the island. This was where he was last seen at about 3 p.m., and this is where his body was found at 8:45 in the morning by a park ranger.
If you've made it this far, you already understand why this story deserves to be told carefully instead of loudly. And that's the only kind of true crime storytelling we do here. If that matters to you, subscribing helps this kind of reporting reach more people before the next headline gets it wrong. By the time the state autopsy results still hadn't surfaced, the Wells family had stopped waiting. They sent Nolan's body to Washington, D.C. for an independent autopsy, a decision Crump described as rooted in an issue of trust with the local process. Former NFL player Colin Kaepernick funded the examination. Filmmaker Tyler Perry stepped in to help cover funeral costs. Reverend Al Sharpton, appearing alongside the family, said the goal of that funeral would be to seek unity. On July 10th, the family stood at a press conference beside Crump and Sharpton. The independent autopsy results, expected that very day, were delayed. Canceled flights. Nothing more sinister than logistics standing between a family and the answers they'd been promised. Crump told them results would come the moment his team had them. Christine spoke that day too, confronting the early framing investigators had offered her. "Why are we so quick to rush to this?" she asked, a mother pushing back against the word accidental before the science had earned the right to use it. The case had, by then, outgrown its own coastline. Representative Benny Thompson called publicly for a full, transparent, and timely investigation. The NOC issued its own statement of support, and when a small protest formed in Ocean Springs, organized by Nolan's own friends, it was Christine who stepped forward to ask that it stay peaceful. "Nolan was not someone who liked fights," she said. "Let's just make sure we keep it peaceful and respectful to one another." Even in grief, she was still protecting the version of her son the world hadn't gotten to know. As of now, nothing about this case has been resolved. No cause of death has been released. No manner of death confirmed. The independent autopsy results are still pending. No charges have been filed against anyone. What's left is a phone that came back when its owner didn't. Two accounts of one conversation that can't both be right. A video nobody has verified, and a family that has made one thing unmistakably clear. They are not going anywhere until the truth does. Nolan Wells cooked dinner for his parents on July 3rd. 9 days later, the people who loved him most were still standing in front of cameras, asking the only question that has ever mattered: what really happened to him on that island? If you want to know the moment this story updates, and it will, subscribe now and stay with us until it does.